Right, so as David mentioned, what we're talking about today is these new guidelines for emergency remedial building work. So we'll talk about what is emergency remedial building work, and David had it exactly right, where it's not Back to the Future, it's not open slather for remedial building work without having to be registered, etc., under the Design and Building Practitioners Act. It's a fairly narrow compass, in fact, but we'll talk about that. Give a couple of practical examples, and there are, notwithstanding that, if it's emergency remedial building work, you don't have to be registered, you don't have to follow the usual guidelines, there are, or the usual compliance requirements, there are nonetheless still some compliance requirements. So just a little bit of a recap, I suppose. Design and Building Practitioners Act. So this was introduced to boost the public's confidence in building again, particularly in residential apartment buildings after the various disasters we had. And so what it does is it says you've got to be registered and you have to provide compliance certification. And it applies mainly to Class 2 buildings, although it also applies to mixed-use buildings. So if your building is partly Class 2 and partly commercial or otherwise, it's the Design and Building Practitioners Act applies. And I've highlighted there, it applies to the repair, renovation or protective treatment of Class 2 buildings. So the kind of stuff that a lot of you guys do and look at. So the provisions, declaration provisions, the registered practitioner has to declare that the work completed, either design work or the actual building work, complies with the relevant acts and regulations in the building code, although they're changing that to the National Construction Code soon. You're also required to lodge various documents at different stages to make sure that there's basically a record of how the particular building has been constructed, so that if there is an issue in the future, fair trading largely, but indeed anybody who's involved can go back and have a look and see, well, was there a design that was compliant? If there was a design that was compliant, was the building constructed in accordance with that design? And you may recall, I think, from the Icon building out at Homebush, one of the issues there was whether or not there were engineering designs that then weren't followed by the builder, and so everyone pointed things to blame. So part of the idea of this is that there will be a history, there'll be a record that we can go back to. And in particular, and this has to do with the various stages in your building and why this needs to be dealt with and complied with. The imperative for it is that you can't get an occupation certificate unless you've gone through the stages and you have all these designs and these compliance certificates there. So basically, we're talking about money so far as the developers are concerned. So they're not going to be able to settle their sales until they've got an occupation certificate and a strata plan. So it's hitting a hip pocket, which is always a good way to enforce things. So they're the various things that have to happen. But we are talking about an exception to this. So you don't have to comply if you have a reasonable excuse. Now, what's a reasonable excuse? Well, there's an at-large concept of what a reasonable excuse might be, but of course no actual definition of a reasonable excuse, except it gives some examples, or that gives some particular examples of reasonable excuses. And one reasonable excuse under the regulation is that you are carrying out emergency remedial building work. But up until now, again, we haven't been told what is emergency remedial building work. What's an emergency? If it's remedial, I think it's probably pretty obvious, but what's an emergency? What do you have to do about it? So finally, Fair Trading has come out with the guidelines as to what emergency remedial building work is. Now, just while we're looking at this, while you're looking at this, notice all the bold ands. So these are not alternatives. You've got to tick all these boxes. So you need immediate action to remedy an issue, and note the word necessary. It has to be necessary action. And the issue is causing, or it's likely to cause, so there's a bit of forecasting here, damage to the building and inability to inhabit or use the building for its intended purpose, or a risk to health or safety, or a risk of further damage to the building. So immediate action is necessary. It's causing damage to the building, and not just damage to the building, it's causing damage to the building which qualifies for one of these three conditions. And these impacts or likely impacts are serious in nature. You might think that if the damage is causing an inability to inhabit or use the building for its intended purpose, it must be serious in nature. Probably right, but there are a myriad of examples out there you can hypothesize, and there possibly is a situation where even though the damage means you can't use the building for its intended purpose, somehow it's not serious in nature. And the work undertaken is limited to what is necessary to mitigate these impacts or likely impacts until further remedial building work can be undertaken. So what that means is, if you do have an issue that fills the first three conditions, you can't go in there and fix the whole thing. So if you've, for example, got an issue with a balcony, I'll come to practical examples, but just at a high level, you've got an issue with a balcony which otherwise qualifies as emergency remedial building work. You can't go and fix everything about the balcony. So you might have some concrete cancer, for example, that's causing an immediate issue. It might crack, it might create a danger. You can't go and fix the concrete cancer. You just got to fix the immediate issue now. So hopefully I'll give you a couple of practical examples. So case study 1, waterproofing membrane, there's a leak, means it's an issue, and I don't know, we've just had some inclement weather. I don't know, you guys might have been, leaks and so on might have been reported to you. It's always a good time to pick up some extra work, because often we don't know where there's an issue with waterproofing until it actually buckets down. So if there is an issue with leaking, then you're allowed to do temporary localised repair work. So patching, stopping the water leak, whatever. That's emergency remedial building work. Replacing the waterproof membrane is not emergency remedial building work, because it goes beyond stopping the immediate issue. Second case study, similar to what I was talking about with the balcony, perhaps. Bit of an extreme example. We talk about an 11-storey building. Structural engineer says there's issues with the load path. There's possible shearing issues. So what you can do is use acro props to temporarily, big word, especially this time of the morning, temporarily prop it so that the emergency is over. But you can't go and do more than that and still have it classified as emergency remedial building work. So there is a limit, and again, back to what David was saying, it's not a panacea or it's the thin end of the wedge to allow you to go in there and do the kind of remedial work, do the remedial designs and supervision that you would have previously done. It is solely confined to what's needed to be done to fix the immediate problem. I guess that flows from the word emergency. To get rid of the emergency, it's about that. So just in terms of, so you go in there, you put your acro props in, or you plug the leak. You've still got to provide a building compliance declaration, whether or not you're a registered practitioner. If you've done the work, you've got to provide a building compliance declaration. It may, and whilst it's called a building compliance declaration, that's the name form, and what you've done may not actually comply with the rest of the regulations and so on. But again, it's about having a record there. And then there's this other form, emergency remedial works consolidated form. So that identifies that the works that has been done is emergency remedial work. Then after that, so after the emergency work's been done, then the Homes Corporation and a registered building practitioner have to go and look at it, work out whether it complies, work out what additional work is required, and they will then have to go through the usual hoops of providing a regulated design and making sure that the actual remedial work that's done complies with that regulated design, and then the compliance certificates to say that it's been done in accordance with the design. And there's just a warning there. If you go out and do emergency remedial work and you don't fulfil the compliance requirements, as you don't lodge that building compliance declaration, you don't fill out the emergency remedial works consolidated form, fair trading will be out there auditing. We all know the building commissioner is very active. This is a new guideline coming in. You can expect that meetings will be looking to make sure that the guideline is being followed, and that it's not being used as an excuse to do more work than what is emergency remedial work without being a registered practitioner and having a regulated design. So they will be conducting audits. So my advice to you, of course, is stay within the law, stay within the bounds, keep out of trouble unless you will give me some more work, which is fine too. So any questions? Yeah.
Another question on undertake. You said doesn't have to be registered.
Doesn't have to be a registered building. Just absolutely.
And he has to fill out the declaration.
That's right.
But he lodges it onto the board.
Well, either he'll have to lodge it, or if he doesn't have the capacity to lodge it, he'll have to find a way to get it to lodge it through someone who does have that.
Just because I don't think they have access to the portal.
I think that's right. So, given that subsequent to the work being done, the owners corporation has to get a registered building practitioner to go through building compliance. If you would go to the owners corporation, who will have been the ones who have retained you, and say, okay, I need to lodge this, so you need to give me someone who can lodge it for me.
And what was the timeline between that repair and engaging
and
engaging a registered designer?
There's no actual timeline in the regulation, so it's within a reasonable time. But because that initial declaration will have been lodged, fair trading will know about it, and so you can expect that they will be contacted.
Just have one more question. Regarding the propping of the structure.
Yeah.
So there is the definition of a regulated design. From my understanding, the structural waterproofing. So it's made concrete's falling, considered included as part of the regulation. Must have the interface as well.
Well, I would expect, I'm not a builder, but I would expect that concrete falling is a structural issue.
Yeah.
And so yes, you need a regulated design to do that. Any other questions?
Does that apply to all class 2 buildings?
All class 2.
That building from 7 to 5, or it goes all the way?
All class 2.
There's no date, cut off date.
Well, it's going forward, so it's going forward from now.
No, like, does that apply to all buildings that were built, for example, 40 years ago?
Absolutely, you're doing the remedial work now. So all class, if you're doing remedial work for a class 2 building or partially class 2 building, this applies. Doesn't matter when the building was constructed. There are some things aren't included. So, for example, the duty of care, which I've spoken about almost ad nauseum, that only goes back 10 years, only 10 years, I say. So it doesn't apply to a building that was constructed, or the constructed of a building, I should say, that was constructed more than 10 years ago. But that's only the duty of care issue. Because this is a current thing if you're doing the remedial work now. I'm sorry. Well, so the Act came in on the 1st of July 2020. So any work that's been done since the 1st of July 2020 has to have been done with a registered practitioner with a regulated design. There were some transition provisions that gave you a little bit of time, but certainly from now onwards, these are the guidelines.
Will that include as well the new edition of class 3 and 9C?
Under the building bill, when it comes in, my understanding is yes, but we don't have that as yet. That's yeah, July 2023. Yeah. But I have to go back and have a look at the transition provisions. But because some things are being put off to 2024, other things coming in 2023. So, for example, licensing and so on, that's being put off. I just can't remember off the top of my head.
I think it's
Where
the
they're going.
insurance that was,
And insurance has been deferred as well because the government's still working through, are you going to be able to get insurance? And the other thing I should say is, of course, the building bill is still a bill, it's law yet. So it hasn't been passed by Parliament. And we've just had a change in government as well. I did have occasion to have a look at the Labor Party's platform on building reform, and it was very, very similar to the Liberal Party platform. So it may well go through as forecasted. It's
Are there any exceptions to this? Can you apply for an exception?
when you say an exception,
As in, only do the remedial work like straight away and then you have to apply to do the other later. What about if that just doesn't make sense? If it means that there's going to be new structure of access to the building for officers and what if it's a multi-tenancy? I mean, if it just doesn't make sense to do that in 2 stages, can you apply to have it done?
well, you can't apply for anyone,
No.
as it were. You are then going into the reasonable excuse
Okay.
territory. And if you think you've got a reasonable excuse that's going to be accepted by fair trading, well, away you go. But it's a pretty large risk to take.
Sure.
You think about it twice. And I'd suggest that it needs for the towns. The better way to go, unless of course you're not going to give you rent. Might give you a different attitude. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much for your attention this morning. You usually don't let me go unless I've got something that's not quite as serious as the legal thing. I noticed that, so we talked before, weather's getting a bit cooler, that means it's rugby season. So we've got the Super 15 going on at the moment. We've got Legislate coming up and we've got World Cup at the end of the year. There's always a big Trans-Tasman rivalry between us and the Kiwis. And so this story is in that spirit, and apologies to John Jonathan or other Kiwi colleagues. But it is a story about a builder. So builder here, Parramatta, Australian builder, and he's just got the house to lock up, and he's talking with the lady of the house about colour selections and so on. And she says, "Oh, okay. So the kitchen, I want the kitchen to be an eggshell light blue." He says, "Okay, fine." Goes to the front door and calls out, "Green side up." So she says, "Okay, and what's the next room?" And she says, "Okay, well, then there's the media room, and I'd like that to be an off-white creamy colour." He said, "Fine, that's all good." Goes to the front door and yells out, "Green side up." Comes back, she's looking quite perplexed. And she says, "Look, we're talking about colours. I tell you what colours I want." And then you go to the front door and you yell out, "Green side up, what's going on?" Said, "Don't worry about that. We've got a couple of Kiwis playing too."
Thank you, David. We always look forward to the joke at the end. Where our speaker this morning, or our second speaker this morning, is Corey Nugent, and he's the CEO of Resilient Insurance, and he's going to be speaking to us on latent defects insurance and supporting the building industry reform. So, Corey, if you'd like to come up and we'll meet you and report on what you've got to say. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for having me today. Good to be in front of a group of experts and talking through some of this reform and what we're bringing about in the insurance industry, in the insurance space, to support some of the reform programs. So we'll just run through a few things today. I want to go to a high level and then allow you guys to ask a series of questions. You guys are the experts in terms of most of this type of detail, so I want to go through that, give you as much opportunity as possible to ask questions. I'll run through first what latent defects insurance is, as well as why it's here. So, a bit of background, latent defects insurance, we are Australia that is in providing latent defects. So we're the first brand here, paying into the insurance space in Australia. We're right on top of the game, and only a century later, we brought this to Australia. It has been around a little bit in Australia in the background for some more commercial type of building, but certainly not across the board in terms of what we're now offering. So Latent Defects itself is an insurance product that's designed as consumer protection, and I'll go into that in a minute in terms of what that actually means. But it provides 10 years worth of cover for the strata and the building owners, which may well include the developer. Certainly does during construction, but provides that 10 years worth of cover from completion of the building. However, we do deal with the insurance and require it to be taken at commencement. So it's definitely by CC. So it provides cover to the structure, the building envelope, fires and building services in that space. It's looking at structural or major defects. It doesn't provide cover for non-structural elements or those sorts of areas. And I'll go through some of the exclusions in a minute. Largely, the reason that we've separated it that way is one, that's the way it's dealt with overseas, but more accurately, in working with the building commissioner on a lot of this type of work, it is the structural major defect space that is causing all of the issue in terms of what we see in Australia and New South Wales for that matter. Consumers are not as worried about the small minor issues, they're worried about catastrophic losses, the Opals, Mascot, vicinity, etc., etc., etc. One of the key differences here to normal insurance in building in Australia is this policy is what we call first resort. So the current HBCF program that exists, for example, in New South Wales and around most of Australia, is what they call last resort. So that means unless it's sunny on Tuesday, you can't make a claim on home warranty or the like. So the builder has to be dead or disappeared or insolvent. It's ineffective, and it's one of the core reasons they changed the name away from insurance, because it's not insurance. Provides a guarantee in the event of other circumstances. Give you a practical example. Porter Davis, everyone knows that failed last week. Everyone's talking about 1,500 homes and the 780 odd contracts that are signed that have not commenced. That's horrific for those owners, and it's terrible for the industry, it's terrible for the employees and a whole range of other people. But off the back of that are a whole raft of consumers, up to 10,000 of them, that have their homes completed, but have no access to cover until last week. They have defects and they're forced into courts or to pay for it themselves or whatever might have happened to affect their difference. This policy is first resort. So what that means is typical insurance, that when the claim event occurs, the claim is made. You don't have to wait for the building to die or become insolvent or disappear. Another key element here is the indemnity that's provided is to the value of the building works. So it's not limited to a particular percentage. One of the key pieces of why we brought this about and worked closely with the building commissioner on this is to try and restore consumer confidence in New South Wales for consumers to start purchasing again off the plan. So talking with the UDIA, for example, the estimate this year is that we will produce 16,000 apartment units this year. It's about a third of what we had traditionally produced. That is economic by all means, it's COVID by all means, but largely, and there's been numerous reports to this, it is confidence. Consumers would prefer to buy established than new. They just don't trust the product that's being produced. And the other benefit that's here, is reduced cost of litigation. So one of the problems, and you guys will be well aware of it in the PI space, is in the building industry, we see a massive amount of litigation. Now, we've got a whole range of different practitioners like David, most of the guys that litigate on appropriate grounds, but there is a cottage industry in terms of chasing some of this work and building up fees and those sorts of things for this case, and it primarily relates to this strata space. It's one of the reasons that strata is a massive problem for insurance, and it's one of the reasons that professional indemnity is a major problem. So previous to resilience, I used to work at the Insurance Council of Australia, and I used to manage amongst other things, the professional indemnity insurers committee. So all the professional indemnity insurers, and we've heard all the stories about my insurance has gone up 400% or million% and all the rest of the different stories that existed. Just to give you an example of where that sits from the insurance point of view, and I'm not asking you to feel sorry for insurers, they're big enough, glad enough to look after themselves. In the last 6 years, insurers have not made a cent off PI insurance. The best year they've had in PI insurance in the last 6 years is a loss ratio of 130%. So what that means, that data is available to the public. You can go and find it yourself if you want to go and troll through APRA data. But to give you an idea what that means for every dollar the insurer collects, they pay $1.30. That's before they pay their own costs, before they pay your broker, before they pay reinsurance, before they pay anything else. So when you look at insurance premiums increasing in the PI space, that is for one reason. It's because they're not making any money out of it. They're in fact losing money. And they need to look at what the cause of that is. It's not just simply a matter of increase the cost of insurance. That's not going to resolve the issue. The issue is that in the building space, for example, a building is probably the second worst performing sub-industry of PI insurance behind medical. So in looking at what the cause is, if we look at consumer protection and the way it's been regulated over many, many years, in terms of what a consumer has to be able to recourse against anybody on a building job, the only mechanism they had was PI insurance. It's slow, it's expensive, and the only winner at the end of the day is the lawyer. So if I'm a consumer, I've just bought an apartment, I'm not being rude to consumers, but if I'm an unsophisticated purchaser, I'm not a building expert, I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, I'm not a builder, I'm not a developer, for example, I've bought an apartment, there's a problem in my building, I have to go to court. Now that's going to take years and years of time and massive amounts of cost. That's the only mechanism that has existed. That'll pay for it yourself through special levies. So that had to change, and that's where David Chandler would come through with this program for an alternative insurance solution. So exclusions out of this policy, as I said, we don't provide cover for non-structural works. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is those non-structural issues will largely manifest very early. And construction legal liability, so private liability insurance will generally look after those sorts of things, as well as the defects liability periods that exist on most contracts. More importantly, from the consumer's point of view, they're not overly concerned about those non-structural issues. Well, they didn't happen, of course, but they're not to that point something that is incredibly onerous to them or catastrophic to them financially. Lack of maintenance and mitigation. So there is an obligation on the strata and the owners to mitigate their own loss. They need to maintain. It's not as simple as saying, well, I didn't do anything to the building for 5 years after I took it over, and now there's a problem. Well, of course there's a problem. You didn't do anything on the site. That's where that problem is. So that is an exclusion where they haven't and can't access that type of work. One of the things Dave spoke to was some regulatory reform that is coming through the building bill, and the timing I agree with in terms of what we're likely to see, but there'll be quite a bit of consultation this year. One of those pieces is around the Strata Act, and there will be some significant changes in that space in terms of subject to new government maintaining the line. There'll be some significant changes in that respect in terms of onus on stratas to absolutely affirm their maintenance and monitoring propositions, so through audit and the like on fire, building services and those types of details. Indirect and economic loss, so the cover doesn't provide for the office was shut for a month. Give me cover because I didn't have any income, that's a different insurance product. And water ingress, so flood and those sorts of things are obviously out. Now, if we go to why some of these sort of things are out and why we're looking at the structural element, there's a couple of interesting data points that come into play here. And the first one would be the Centre for International Economics. We did a report for the Building Ministers meeting, a federal government cohort of all of the building ministers around the country. And they went and ran a whole raft of assessment around what is the cost of defects in building in Australia. And they looked at more than just what is the cost of defects, what's the ongoing cost beyond that, the mental health issues, the other areas, but just the physical cost of defects in Australia. Anyone want to hazard a guess at what that is per year, every year? $2.57 billion per year. So it's not an issue where she'll be right, we'll get it done, we'll sort it, we'll fix it. It is going horribly wrong in that space for consumers, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are paying that $2.57 billion. That or having to go to court to enforce their rights, which is going to take 5-10 years to get there. One of the key elements of one of the key elements of our program in terms of what we do is we require what is called a technical inspection service to operate on this product. All right. So in terms of understanding how it works, I'll go through that in a minute, but the insurance must be taken out or agreed to be taken out by commencement. And one of the reasons for that is we're not looking to do what insurance has done in the building industry forever and be reactive and go back when something goes pear-shaped and say, we all know what went wrong, let's fix it. It's much more proactive to be involved in the process to make sure that things don't go wrong. The only way we do that, because I'm not an engineer or a building surveyor, that's what you guys all do, is we require the builder and or developer to appoint a technical inspection service. That is a group from a panel of approved inspectors that we have. And that list is now growing with our cohort. In fact, incidentally, there's a few people in this group that are working with a couple of those entities already. But the idea of that is to set a benchmark of what is to be inspected. We have a specific set of rules, templates, requirements for what is to be inspected. And that's agreed before construction starts. So the builder and developer can factor all of that cost into their feasibility because they know about it early and they know what's going to be inspected. It is extensive. I've heard a lot of different things about there's going to be someone sitting on the site every 5 minutes. No, there's not. It's not perfect. There is a set of inspections that occur at specific periods of time to specific areas. You guys are the experts, and I've already seen a few of these reports working where the expert turns up and says, hey, this might be a problem. They flag it, they go back, they check, it's fixed, it's appropriate, it's done well, whatever might happen in that space. We're relying on your expertise to tell us where things are right, where they're wrong, where they're potentially going wrong, and what the remediation is. That's going to remove most of the issues that we see in terms of latent defects post-completion. And builders and developers are on board with that proposition because they're sitting there saying and acknowledging it's far cheaper to fix the problem during construction than to go back after and repair it, especially when that repair may or may not be holistic in terms of achieving a result that we want to see. In terms of, as I said, in terms of issuing the cover, it's taken out at commencement before we can get involved when you get to excavation on a site. But as soon as you've started to form some shoring, we're out. Because one of the key elements of what we do, the first inspection is a full design audit. So to that end, we need the geotechs, etc., to be able to get in there and tell us what the soil is, what things are like and where, all of those sort of details, move settlement, all of the rest of that sort of gear. So once you've progressed, it's too far. Those inspections can take a bit of time, obviously, depending on the type of construction that's being dealt with, but that report comes out and they run those reports, as you can see, right through the construction period, right to the end. And if the construction is completed in a form where the expert is saying everything's great, it's not a guarantee insofar as if we get that sign off that there's never going to be a defect while you buy insurance. Sure, there'll be defects, but it will dramatically limit the scope of what those defects are likely to be and the impact on the consumers. Once that's all complete, we issue the final policy and the owner is protected, or the owners are protected for 10 years post completion.
Did you have your own geotech survey?
I don't, but we have those through the technical inspection service. So yes, that gets done at that point. So there's geotech, mechanical, civil, fire, water. Depends on the building. It's really hard to say we do this geotech on everything, but it depends on the building, what's being built, where is it, as to what's required. And those reports are built on the basis of
The structural cracking rate to settlement or concrete.
It could be a range of things, so that's why you need somebody there to say, well, it might be this, or it could be that, or what happens here, or what happens there. So,
Just, what about waterproofing? That's a massive problem for us.
huge piece of this, waterproofing is covered under this.
Oh, is that okay? So you've got that no water ingress for flooding, but yeah.
Waterproofing is covered. So, and that can be as far down as internal. So, when I talk structural, it's not just the external facade, it can be internal units as well.
So how do you use the report? Do you force the dealer to fix it? Is it equal to when construction? And what happens if they don't?
There's a couple of ways that works. So we've worked extremely closely with David Chandler, Fair Trading, those guys in structuring this program. What we do is we say, it's one of the reasons we ask for the insurance to be taken out at the start, so that this monitoring occurs. What we then do is if we find an issue, i.e. you find an issue, it's in the report we get, and we require the builder and developer to fix it. There's a little bit of subjectivity in that. It depends on how material the issue is. If it's a small issue, you may well let that go and they'll fix it as they go, because it's not going to create a material issue theoretically at the end. If it's a major defect or a potential major defect, they have to fix it. The two mechanisms that we use there are, if they dispute that, we put whoever our expert is in touch with their experts and they can look at a resolution. International experiences, and I've spoken to 2 or 3 underwriters from Paris and England on this, they've never had an experience where the experts have not come up with a resolution to where that works. You're dealing with professional people and they'll come up with that solution. If that doesn't play out, the second one is we've got the RAB Act and those sort of things that are in place, and Fair Trading will get involved and say, that's a problem, fix it. Because that's where they're looking to go in that space. Ultimately, if the thing is not fixed and it is material, the end policy at completion won't be issued. Now, when we've challenged builders and developers on this, they say, oh, it's too much power. So why are you trying to hand over builders the significant defects in it? And they can't answer that question. So why are you trying to give this thing to the consumer with all of these significant issues in them? They will never have an answer to that. Fix it, or either you won't get the cover or the building commission is going to turn up and issue an order if the defect is considered sufficiently significant to the consumers. So in terms of where we're at, I know that there's a lot of people here who Australia. As I said, we have a lot of people in this space. We have people that are part of this group already that are part of the TIS program. It's not a closed shop. It's not limited at the moment. People that want to get into that scheme can certainly deal with it. But in terms of consumer protection, let's just do a comparison of what we offer compared to the bond. There's a bit of extra information on that. Currently, the bond provides 2 years worth of cover. Ours is 10 years. Anybody that tells me a significant defect will categorically manifest itself to a consumer being able to pick it up in 2 years hasn't seen many buildings. Most of them occur sometime after that. So after 2 years, the consumer is on their own. It's a PI claim after that. The value of protection provided is 2% under the bond. Full stop. That's it. Nothing else. Under ours, it's building value, so the replacement value. And there is some factoring in those numbers over time that increase that value. So if you watch the claim as a strata in year 9, the number would be higher because of factoring that we apply in that space. The cost of access, it's at least 2.25%. By the time you pay for all the inspections and the cost of capital and all the rest of those elements that go into it, it's 2.25. Currently, we've issued about 50 or 60 quotes and or policies in this space in New South Wales in the last 6 months, and the average on that is 1.5%.
Is the cost to inspect it, is that a cost plus contract between you and the developer or the builder?
When you say you mean me or you?
No, you, for example, the building developers accepted to take out the policy.
Generally the developer, but the building can do it. We recommend that it's both, but
Yeah, and then you go through the inspection regime through the program you've got.
Yep.
Is that a cost plus program?
No, yes, in part, but we say to the developer, you need to select one of the inspectors from our panel. Now, that's a market, so they go and get quotes from those that are already approved and those that will be approved. Whatever the cost is, the developer can choose that. The difference here is that it's not a cost exercise because those reports or those scopes of work, one, have to be approved by us before we'll accept it. So if we want to get one for half the price, we may well not accept it before it goes forward. And two, the scope of what needs to be in those reports, we've already established that with those panel providers, which is why we select them. So we know what those reports are going to be. There's no subjectivity in that space. The third and most important part is there is absolute independence. So in providing that report, you have to be able to guarantee on that project that you have zero involvement. That's a guarantee made in participation to the TIS program. There is zero involvement on that project. You cannot be aligned to it in any way, shape or form. The report, the inspection, the whole piece has to be entirely independent.
Is that people on the panel, is it company or person?
It's generally company that we've got at the moment, but they subcontract a lot of that stuff out. So there's a couple of people in the society, for example, that are extremely active in the TIS program right now, working within an entity. So generally you'll find a firm, ABC Consultants, for example, has a specialisation. They may subcontract GA Tech or something else to somebody. That's acceptable, as long as we know what's happening and who they're using. So yeah, there's no hard and fast, you must be this, you must be that. You need to have the capacity to be able to access the reports that are needed throughout.
So when the inspection is done, and let's say there is a non-compliant issue, and say they remediate that or negotiate that, that inspector then, does that inspector then get involved in what it should be?
Yep. So there'll be a cost escalation at that point if they have to go back that wasn't factored into the original scope. So it's not a fixed price arrangement that, let's say on a job, and we have this example on one at the moment, that's gone really well, where the scope of works was done, the cost was provided, the developer accepted the cost. They were doing the reports and what we call RD5, which is a waterproofing one, by the way. They were going in and they found issues along the way. They spoke about how that was to be remediated before completion. That was done. The inspector had to go back out and inspect that one, it was done, but also escalated the number of inspections that they were going to do to check ongoing detail. That increased the cost of that TIS agreement. And the agreement that we have in place in that allows for the TIS inspector to change that at their election. We don't want anything to stand in the way of the expert determining what's needed. If you need to do more, do more. If it's required to meet the purpose, you determine what you need and how you do it. If there's an additional cost, then that goes to the builder, developer, whoever to figure out. And at the end of the day, the rationale behind that is it's a risk mitigation process. One of the elements that stand in place here with the building commissioner licensing, our program is governance, right? How strong are you at your processes? Rather than just having a document that sits there and says, I do this, put it in the filing cabinet and go, I've got one. How well do you live that document? Do you know what your risk management protocols are? So we work heavily, for example, with Safe Work New South Wales, because a lot of those elements play down that line. So there's a lot of triggers in this space that go to the point you're making, but the TIS provider has full autonomy to be able to determine what they need to do and when.
Sure. This key, the LDI, will be taken by developers and builders. So from that perspective, the two developers will look that they will recover.
They always do, you're dead right. How many of them will recover?
No, that's three. That's not a question.
That's three.
Sorry.
Three will recover.
Yeah. So you're basing that because only three, then the 1.5 will finish practically. You give it up and it's 10 years. And the other question is, does that the cover of the building value, does that decrease with time because of depreciation?
No, it increases. So if we cover a building for X amount, based on, economic factors, after each year it will increase, the value of indemnity will increase because of, rectification costs or whatever might occur in that space. I'll give you an example of that shortly, so we'll see how it comes through. Interestingly, with the bond, when you talk about the recovery aspect, there's two parts that play into there. So I sit on a ministerial panel last year and the year before on this product when I was with the ITA, and a whole range of other stakeholders. There was builder groups, development groups, a whole range of people were in there. After all of that, this product was identified as what the government wanted to pursue. That report was handed down and given to both sides of politics, and both wholly accepted the report and what came out of it. There will be consultation at some point, but most of the steps that are in there have already been enacted. In terms of how this works, the strata bond against LDI, originally we received written confirmation that our product was an offset to the bond. So you could choose either latent defects or the bond. You don't have to take both, right? That's since been legislated. That's in mid-November last year. You can now select that. And they're changing the board order. It takes them 6 months to change the order. That's November, there's still no one near it. So you're able to offset that. In terms of the bond, it's very rarely returned. Now that's not as a result of poor workforce. It's not. The cottage industry I was talking about before, geniusly, has identified a proposition where they go out, they frighten stratas into producing, reams of paper of defects within the 2 years solely to deal with fee introduction. So some of the lawyers we're using, for example, to help us with some of this as a practical example, they were talking about a developer. This is only a month ago, a developer that they're representing in a claim. The legal costs for them were about 40 grand, nowhere near court, but around 40 grand. The opposing side was at 160 grand. Because they go out and get a whole heap of reports, spend 2 months reading them, tickets going, and at the end of the day, the claim in the Supreme Court's made 10 million. It's settled for $1 million, because at the end of the day, the benefit's already been made, as opposed to choosing a reputable firm that will argue the toss on the points that matter. That's why the bond is very rarely returned, because it's chewed up by this exercise where this industry is wholly active in trying to chase those up. So it's not always the builder or developer, but more importantly, from the consumer's point of view, that 2.25%, for example, that is part of the sale price. I've had a couple of builders and developers say, no, it's not. No, we pay it, we're going to get it back. How many commercial builders do you know that have got 2.25% net cash sitting there on any job, ready to go at risk? There's none of them. They don't make that sort of money. It's charged into the job through the feasibility at the start. If they get it back, that's a win. It goes to profit. Good luck to them if they build a good product. But at the end of the day, it goes into the price of the job. So does the other one, 1.5. It goes into the job. It goes in at the start, and it's well known. We've also heard about 2.25 and cost of capital, etc. 1.5 is a cash hit right at the start. If you're prepared, again, we're talking about governance here. If you're prepared and it goes into the feasibility, you're not paying 1.5%. You've drawn down the number and you're paying whatever your interest rate is on an interest-only loan and what you've drawn down against the cost of that until settlement. The banks prefer the second option, because with a bank, you're sitting there saying there's only 3 of the big 4 that will do it in terms of the strata bond. The only mechanism a builder has to put money into the strata bond is 1, cash, or 2, a bank guarantee. The banks, all of them, the only mechanism for the bank guarantee, the only security is cash. So at the end of the day, the 2% is cash, no matter which way you go. So I have that type of cash up for that period of time. It's not a productive use of capital, but equally at the end of the day, you're looking at that 2.25% tied up. I get some of it, all of it back if you do good luck, but the other one is operating on exactly the same mechanism if you're prepared.
So would you say the inspection, the cost of doing the inspection to the project
is a supervision cost, partly. But so does it come out of that 1.5? No. So it's definitely an additional cost to the project.
Look at it as QA. So you need to look at it as QA. 100% right.
Yes.
But it's always infinitely more cheaper to fix it before,
Yeah, of course.
before the building is finished than after. And I can give you an example of a building with 43 apartments, every bathroom, ensuite and laundry leaked. They vacated the entire building for 6 months whilst the builder remediated all those areas. Now you think of the costs of, and this high quality, I worked out it was about, just to do the building works was probably about $3 million. On top of that, you had the relocation costs that the builder had to pay, relocation and rent and whatnot for those 43 families that were dislocated for that time. It's going to be cheaper having a consultant out there.
So it's basically another clerk of work.
Probably not exactly with the clerk of work, but it's gone back that way. Yeah, I guess you can argue that. When we look at the cost though, when we say, oh yeah, the inspection cost is on top, our experience at the moment is that the inspections, and this comes from a couple of people that are already providing the strata bond inspections and providing ours. Cost is the same on either side. So when we go to this 2.25, it's cost of capital plus inspections. 1.5 is going to turn into 1.6, 1.65 maybe by the time you're fully through. That's a number after GST, stamp duty, and all of the other levies and charges that are in as well. So no matter which way you try and cut it, it's still cheaper than 2%. And by the way, it's provided 5 times the level of cover. If you have a look at the bottom here, what we're saying is that it's providing alternative accommodation to the consumers, the bond's not. It's providing the quality assurance, which was just mentioned, the bond's not. It's providing strict liability, which means, I don't want to give a legal lesson, David, we can stand up and talk about that, but strict liability is a key element of this program. That PI insurance is one based on fault. It's a litigious or a litigation protection. PI insurance mistakenly is never and never was intended to be consumer protection. It is an insurance policy designed to protect from the cost of litigation. Full stop. That's what it is. This policy doesn't require fault. So when the owner has a claim, as I said, it was first resort, they don't need to go to court to find out who was the cause or how many different people were the cause. The insurer's on. It's then on the insurer to work out, do I want to recover or not? Now, builders and developers get nervous and start saying, oh, so you're going to come after me. Not necessarily. In commercial insurance, it's very, very unusual for insurers to chase or recover in those cases for 2 reasons. The most important one, it just costs too much. Right. When you talk about recoveries, and they always happen in what we call retail insurance, so motor insurance and house insurance. This is always a car running into another one. They chase all the time in that. In commercial insurance, it's not worth my value. If I pay a claim for $1 million, they're just going to charge me $1 million to go and get it. I wish. So, more often than not, it's not there. In fact, the last numbers I saw, commercial recoveries on insurance were around about 15%. So it's much more rare than you would think. And the ability for the market to provide consumers with additional cover. So I spoke before to consumer sentiment. Building Commission did a report with McCrindle. McCrindle were a leading consultancy firm on that space. They did a report, again, it's public, you can find it if you want, in terms of what the community is thinking around off the plan purchases. Right, so they interviewed 1,500 people who were in the market at that point looking to purchase. 30% said they would buy off the plan, which is a dramatic reduction in the past. Just had no confidence in what they were buying. We use, and you've probably all heard of the ICERT program, we use that as part of our mechanism to determine trustworthiness, because one of the key elements of this scheme is it's selective. We will not provide this to everybody. You need to be reputable, you need to be trustworthy, you need to have proven evidence that you will produce the product that is designed. we have said no already to a few different propositions that have come up. I don't know who, but probably guess one or two of them. But yeah, so we won't offer it to everybody. The advantage for the developer is I can market this thing. I'm giving someone 10 years cover for the building value on a strict liability basis with alternative accommodation. The bond, none of those, none of them. So what we're talking about is, in fact, talking to David yesterday about some of these sort of things. Some of that language may well change over the short term, but the bond will start to become probably the two mechanisms. I was talking about the ministerial report before. One of the key mechanisms relative to the bond in that was one of two options. One is if the insurance market becomes mature enough in this space, and by that we mean probably 3 insurers offering this product, which is sounds like not many, but give an example in the agriculture space. There are only 5 insurers that provide all of Australia's agriculture insurance. So 3 insurers is quite a competitive market in this space. If we had that, the government would make one of two decisions. One is to scrap the bond and make this mandatory, which is one we've pushed against because government's not really good in history with mandating insurance products. Or the second one is to increase the value of the bond and the time that it lives. So over a period of time, we increase it to 5% over 6 years. As late as yesterday, there is a really strong push which is likely to occur with the current new government, to increase the bond by doubling it by June 25. It starts to become uneconomical for developers at that point because one, it's providing close to zero value to consumers. It's a cost of building in terms of where the developer is looking at, and it starts to change the equation in that space. So let's have a look at a bit of an example of what's happened. So let's look at Opal, and Opal is a common used example in a whole range of things, but this is extrapolated, can apply in a lot of different places. But let's compare, had the bond been in place on Opal or had LDI been in place? The building cost was 330 million. I'm not going to guess as to what the issues were. I've got a fair idea, and I've spoken to a lot of experts, but that's for courts to work out who's responsible and what they are. Benefit that would have been provided by the bond was $6.6 million maximum. Could not have gone above that. L1 starts at 50, but would have been the building value had the builder provided or the developer provided that request at the time. The bond would have lasted 2 years, so it's now expired. There's no benefit available to those owners anymore. Ours is 10 years, would still be in place. The other point here is ours is what it has a right of reinstatement in it. So if the full indemnity is used, they can pay a premium and reinstate it and start again. The current claim estimate in that space is $45 million. So already looking at the bond, the owners are $39 million out of pocket. That needs to go through litigation and many, many, many years of you pay. If they get that. In the case of where this works, let's look at how the Opal position has translated so far and what the future looks like for those owners in that building, bond versus LDI. When the event occurred, the owners were booted out on Christmas Eve. They were accommodated. There was a whole mad rush to try and find accommodation. The media went into frenzy, and most of the issue on that building is media frenzy more than reality. But nonetheless, those owners were looking at that proposition. It took 6 to 8 months before they worked out what the accommodation piece needed to look like for those owners and get experts on side to give a meaningful report on what they were going to do next. They then went through and repaired a whole heap of transfer values and a whole range of other elements in that space. And the engineering reports came out after it, and they were all qualified because nobody had stepped in and actually done a full scope of what needed to be done and repair the thing at that point. So what that did was the owners all had, now remember there's 390 odd lots within Opal. Okay, so the owners were paying about 200 grand for Strata insurance, which is a requirement in New South Wales. They have to have it paying just under 200 grand strata insurance at that point. The current position is on one insurer that will give it to them, it's 2.2 million per year. And the exclusions on the policy mean that unless a plane flies into it, it's not covered. Because of those sorts of things. So 390 lots, 2 million, that's the cost just for insurance on the strata. Forget the strata fees, forget everything else, that's just the cost of that. There isn't a bank in Australia will loan anybody a mortgage, give anyone a mortgage to buy into it. Can't get it, doesn't exist, and you won't get that proposition. What's worse is there's currently 3 apartments for sale in April. 50 grand. They all paid 800, 600, 800 million dollars. That's the current value of their property. Now, if their property is worth 50 grand and the insurance is costing them 5 or 6 grand a year, the life cost on that building is horrific for those owners. Had there been LDI on that property, one, the design proposition would have picked up the steel issues and the design problems. 2, it would have dealt with the concrete issues and the transfer being around the rear being around the wrong way because there would have been someone on the site looking at it. But more importantly, let's say we missed all of that. More importantly, when those owners were booted out on Christmas Eve, the insurer would have been there, they'd have been accommodated somewhere, and then on Christmas Day, they'd have been working with somebody to get in and fix it. But the insurer doesn't want to wear all that cost. They want it done there and then and properly to be able to walk away. The lived experience on that building is dramatically different with insurance and without it. With insurance and a bond that would have provided them 0 protection. So you can start to see how that example plays out. So I'll go into some questions if you.
I have one question. Just in your second slide, I think you had waterproofing, yeah, for 12 months. So what is that?
So there's an excess on the waterproofing for 12 months. You can't make a claim the first 12 months because you've got the maintenance period and the DLP applying on the liability policy already. So double insurance.
So and it's then covered for how many years?
Yeah.
Even though the statutory warranty is 6. Well,
Is it?
well,
So
the lawyers there.
yeah, that's the whole point. Is it 6 or 10? No, there's no real design really making it back.
Yeah, it's negligence, but yeah.
Well, you've got 2 different things. So one's negligence, that's the liability for that, and the other is the statutory warranty, which is effectively a contractual issue. So contractual issues, 6-year time limit. Duty care negligence, it's 6 years from the date the defect becomes apparent with a 10-year long stop.
Yeah, exactly.
But thank you for that.
No, that's fine. So if you're looking at a builder and developer, it's a good question there. So after 2 years in the DLP, what do you take on that space? And you've got either a duty of care or a statutory warranty. What that means on any of those buildings is you have at least 4, but possibly 8 years uninsured and uninsurable exposure. Unless you buy insurance.
Corey, good to see you again.
You do, mate.
How many years?
Yeah.
Was there any talk of this moving into the class 1 area?
Yep. So
Taking the place of HBCF?
I was just thinking that as a question asked. So first thing is that product we have now applies to entities class 2 to 9. So it's available on all of those. And in fact, we've already got one request from an LGA actually for a swimming pool and aquatic centre. So the LGA is starting to get on board. We have spoken with Sierra on some of that detail, and we're looking to take this product in the short term down to everything that's in the HBCF scheme that is multi-unit, that type of thing. The building bill that's going up for consultation later this year will start to talk to insurance at that point. And we would not like to offer in that space, but it's a fairly different proposition.
As a first insurance.
It will be absolutely first. The product structure will be the same. The operation might be a little bit different because you're dealing with a different part of it. So, interestingly, we're talking with Victoria and a few other states, and they have the genius idea down there of providing their insurance scheme, that maybe they should expand that scheme for class 1 out to everything up to 8-story special. It's the same.
That's going to be just after us, right?
It's going to be expensive. My bet is it's about $250 million. So, yeah, I don't know, but yeah, anything, you know, if you're building a house or a pool, it's got to be the same as an 8-story building. Definitely.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the POT.
Yep.
And how we bought it.
Right.
We whoever's designing the project, really, just to quickly come here, designing the project, coordinates all those other consultants, right? So when you get an inspector, you get him in when the physical stuff starts. But getting a report from POTEC, I reckon it's important to get an inspector involved at that time, because that's where it all begins. Sometimes, you know, you get a POTEC report and it goes to the engineer, structural engineer, so he gets to decide what sort of footing it is. But it also tells you about the kind of soil that's on site. So when you get, let's say you found it, you know, salt, a lot of salt there. And the builder gets to the job, and goes, oh, yeah, double brick, he'll just buy brick. You know,
You're 100% right. There's a number of really good examples proving your point, and the geotech is critical nowadays and must be involved and report before the work is started. Sure, you can have done excavation. We can get involved at that point. If we go past that, we can't get involved.
yeah, so the inspector that comes on site has no idea about this, about what's on site, because he doesn't get that report.
Our inspector doesn't have that idea.
I don't think they.
We have every document that exists for it, and that inspector would get access to all of those documents, detail and information before they were on site.
Oh, okay.
So there's nothing hidden from them. They have full access to the full DA and CC document set, for example.
So they get involved from the start.
Yeah, 100%. There's a couple of good examples of that. Go and ask people at Mascot what they think about should there be better geotech. There was a latent defects claim in Canada a few years back where the geotech went out and did all of their work and whatever, and Canada being what it is, it was in snow period, the ground was frozen. Did their report, didn't think about, well, what's the ground going to be like once it thaws out? When it did, it's fairly significant issues. So it goes both ways, but you're dead right. They have to be on. It's one of the critical pieces. Looking at settlement, looking at all of those sorts of details in that space, understanding what that looks like is a really critical part of kicking that off.
The service of the technical inspector, and assuming that the technical inspector is jack of all trades, master of none, that's a word. If he receives a report from a geotech guy that says the soil is this, therefore the foundations must be this, and the footings have to do this, and this bearing capacity, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, okay, I can read that and understand they're the requirements. And then you get a structural engineer that comes up with the design to meet those requirements. And I'm looking at a set of drawings that has footings and piles and whatnot with reinforcement that starts to become gobbledygook to most people. Does the technical inspector rely on a certificate from that structural engineer to say that he's complied with the geotech requirements?
Possibly, it is depending on each project.
Okay, so because that could go all the way up, because the technical inspector may know certain things, waterproofing, brick walls, roofing, whatnot, flashings and that. But when it comes to those very specialised mechanical equipment and installations and electrical distribution boards and whatnot, he's going to need to, or he or she will need to rely on some sort of certificate from a independent consultant rather than the developer or builder's consultant to say that this meets the design intent?
I don't want our technical inspectors collecting pieces of paper.
Yeah,
I want them to inspect, I want them to go and do the work. The fact that you might have somebody that is a jack of all trades and master of none is fine. They're driving the process. They need to subcontract that work out to the right people, and we check that before they're appointed, that they're using the right people in those spaces. So when I said there's some people in the society that are doing work, they're doing a specialised work for one of those jack of all trades. They're not doing everything. So it's geotech and those sorts of things. So yes, they need to provide that service. The safeguard there is when we underwrite that, and the reinsurer does look at all of these sort of things as well. They're all engineers, for example. So my underwriters, there's a geotech, mechanical, civil, an architect over in France with the reinsurer. Their team is full of engineers. So it's all checked through that process. It's not you go to the report, I'm going to see you if it goes pear-shaped because you got it all right. There's a QA on that process.
Right, what about consequential impact of some of these defects, like 43 bathrooms, there would have been damage flooring on front end, a cluster of builders, insurance to cover that.
Well, it's all part of it. So a really good example, and it's a good case. People talk about waterproofing. Go, well, that's just outside or in the structure. It's not. So nothing to talk to you guys about how things happen or whatever. But you know, if you've got a guy that comes in and makes big rock and screws through a pipe in the wall or whatever, that's part of the structure. Impacts the bathroom. The water's going to flow out to the bedroom next door or whatever. It's all that is covered as part of the pipe.
It's great to see that you're getting in front of it. Because I think we all knew the building bond was a band-aid on the other thing. And you can't really fix it with a big stick later. No. So yeah, very encouraging to see that there's investigation of the product will actually get to it before it starts.
And that's the aim. So the whole thing with Constructing New South Wales and that reform program has been that Minister Dominello, while he was minister, often said that either in closed quarters or sometimes publicly that the bond was only ever intended as a temporary solution until something better was able to be identified. We believe this is better, but this isn't the panacea to all things in the building industry. One of the problems we've had in the building industry is far too long. We all know that there's defect issues, that there's quality issues, that there's performance issues, but the history has been it's your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault. It's nobody's fault. It's an entire industry proposition that we all need to get involved and be part of a solution instead of trying to find who's the most to blame for why things occur the way they do. That's one of the reasons that Constructing New South Wales has worked so well. There's now a model, I can tell you, talking about the states. They're all looking to try and copy bits of or follow that mechanism on this piece, because in each of those consultations, and on a number of those, Mark, for example, on a couple of those meetings, but there was over 250 different representatives from different areas of the industry involved all the way through to make sure that everyone was heard, that everyone had a part in the solution. In doing that, you're never going to find something that meets everyone's needs or that makes everyone happy, but the program that we now have is a solid one. By way of example, we spoke about Victoria with the problems they might have in the short term, but one of the examples there, I use an analogy at the moment in terms of where the rest of the states are, and it's the joy of working in a federated model like we have in Australia. New South Wales has found the round room and they've gone through the front door. I'm not saying they've fixed everything, I'm not saying they've got it all right, there's a long way to go. They walked through the front door. The rest of Australia is now looking at that saying, geez, that works. They've got the building industry on board, they've got the professional side on board, all of this is starting to work. But what you tend to find with the other states in terms of following along is they're saying, we like to look at that round room, but we can't walk through that door because New South Wales has already done it. We don't like copies, so we've got to go around the other side and see if we can find a different door to get into the same room. And that's the problem we've got around the rest of Australia at the moment. None of them want to copy what David Chandler's done or what Victor Dominello did or Kevin Anderson did because some of us look like they've saved the world themselves. So, yeah, the only other one I wanted to mention, sorry, John, the only other one I wanted to mention, it was brought up in David's speech before around insurance and the duty of care going back 10 years. I can give you a bit of context in that space that The DBP requires PI insurance to be in place for that 10-year proposition and also retrospectively. It was never intended to be retrospective. In fact, that was an agreement made 5 minutes before midnight in getting that bill through Parliament. The insurers have all said categorically, so there's an exemption in place at the moment, which was just extended for 12 months. That insurance product, 10-year retrospectivity, I can categorically guarantee will never exist, ever. And the government will have to keep clicking over that exemption. They've done it in another, they did it in the Home Building Act in the resi space back in the late 90s and 2000s, where they just kept ticking over the exemption because the insurers said they're never going to do it. It's not because insurers are trying to be tough in that space. If you're sitting there saying, PI, one, it doesn't make any money now. So what about if you're going to make me go and not only cover, not 7 years, but 10 years for the same price? And by the way, I'm going to pick up all the stuff 10 years previous that I had no involvement or knowledge about. Sounds like a good business model. So that will never exist.
HBCF has been losing money since inception.
About 100 million.
And I think last year's was a record, and I think this current year is going to be even bigger. So there's got to be an alternative. The Treasurer would be pulling his hair out having to deal with this issue. So I think we're on the right path. What you've told us about resilience, is there a local underwriter, or is this reverse? Wow.
So it's secured by our insurer. And the ultimate security for it is a European reinsurer, who is the largest reinsurer of this product globally, the 4th biggest reinsurer in the world total, and is the only one that has been offering this for 7 years.
Looks like you've silenced us.
Some corporates whisper.
No, neither. In fact, when it came to warranty, their parting words when they left the HBCF schedule is, as long as their backside points to the ground, I'll never get
One of our newly retired members is now doing a bit of lasering, so thank you very much for that and informative.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, thanks so much. It was okay. That's it for this morning. Thank you everyone for coming. I hope you enjoyed the time, found it informative, and did some networking. And it's very nice to see more ladies in the room this time. Thank you very much. Okay.